Good evening to everyone. Welcome to our talk about commission art and community. Together with me tonight, you might see Arturo Galansino, director of Palazzo Strozzi in Firenze, in Italy. Marinella Senatore, the artist, and you have, of course, already admired her installation at the entrance of the fair, Bodin Alliance, and Francesco Stocchi, director of the Department of Contemporary Art at Boijmans Museum in Rotterdam. I'm Chiara Paolino. I'm a professor of arts management. So today, what you will hear about is how art can contribute to building up a community through 4 different perspectives. Let's say we have the managerial, the curatorial, the artistic perspective, and I'll try, to define a red thread by connecting them through the research that I do. Here you find some pictures that could represent all of us, the museums we work for, the artworks that could represent our approach to art and communities, and something that I do in terms of research regarding the role of artists as educators for communities. First of all, we decided to explore 2 topics today that could be relevant and compelling to understand how commission art could contribute to social progress and social discussions somehow, and to build up collaboration within communities. And the first topic that we would like to face is how art can reach out for, the most marginalized categories, those that are not represented by any institutions, and that could be not so easily, achieved and reached out for. So first of all, I would ask to Arturo Galansino how within your institutions, through the work that you have done with Marinella Senatore, but also through other examples, how you try to engage your institution into reaching out for the disadvantaged people and to create involvement in the society.
Thank you, Chiara. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, that's a great images to start with, I think, because, first of all, because it looks like the installation we have at the entrance of the fair. This was the installation Marinella installed in the courtyard of Palazzo Strozzi at the end of 2020. And it was the first installation of light in a museum, right, Marinella, after your very famous, groundbreaking scene for the catwalk of Christian Dior. And let me put this installation in the context, because we are at the end of 2020. So we are talking about reaching the public. At this time, in the deepest moment of the pandemic crisis, there was just no public. Nobody was around. And so we wanted, but we didn't want to just to close the museum. The courtyard of Palazzo Strozzi, I don't know if you are familiar with Florence, is like a piazza, it's like a square. It's not just the courtyard of a building. And so we wanted to look at our courtyard like the pulsing heart of the city in this very, very cold and sad winter. And we couldn't find any better artist than Marinella to make this magic. And I think her installation in the courtyard was a light representing hope for all the people at this very, very dark time. But this was not just it was just the beginning, I think, of the operation, because actually starting from these sentences of empowerment that Marinella put on the installation, we created a digital program, because of course digital was the only way to have an interaction with the people at the time. And Marinella was able to create workshop, tailor-made workshop for all our fragile publics, because we realized that after 6-7 months of pandemic, actually the most fragile public was the public more in need of our action, of our institution. So I'm talking about people affected by Alzheimer, autism, people living in nurse residencies. We also reached people in prison, remember Marinella. We are talking about thousands of people that day after day, Marinella, she used to put in a net of a relationship. And then I will let you speaking about that because, of course, it's your specialty. And yes, please show the other image. This is another image representing that, our action toward this fragile public. These people are people affected by Parkinson. We have this very interesting and important activity for people affected by Parkinson about the movement. And this is the courtyard in a more normal time, so a few months ago, 6 months ago, in front of another contemporary art installation. In this case, is Refik Anadol, the famous Turkish digital artist. And this, I think, is an image which is very good as an example of what we do to bring people in the museum and to make what we do relevant in their life.
Thank you very much. So we have a first example. This is an Italian international institution that could be named for this best practice in terms of how to reach out for the more marginalized community, both through the presence of the artwork, the presence of the artist, but also the digital means. So bodies and technologies are together in addressing this fragility that if the pandemic did something good, is that maybe we became all more sensitive to the fragilities in our community and to the fact that we need to welcome them. I will leave to Francesco Stocchi for other two examples and another contribution to this topic.
Thank you, Chiara. Yes, another example we would like to put in balance with what we just heard from Arturo is another experience involving the work of Marinella. This time we are in Sao Paulo at the 34th Biennale of Sao Paulo, which was postponed because of the pandemic. It should have happened in 2020, and it was pushed for a year. And Marinella was already invited to the Biennale in the frame of her ongoing project, which is the School of Narrative Dance, which is it is a project which, well, she will be able to tell us much better than I do, but we started about 10 years ago, and it's a project that really exemplifies her open and interdisciplinary approach basically through body language and through an interaction with communities, with people, a real interaction. So once we were developing the project, when we saw that the main thing which wasn't possible was the direct, the body exchange and the direct relationship, the project had to shift. So he had to, let's say, enter into a reaction mode. And so how to deal with that? The invitation was to Marinella was to visit one of the communities. In that case, was a favela in the urban area of São Paulo, well, which is huge. We're talking of 22 million people, but still urban area. And the area is called Tiradentes. So how can we develop this relationship in another way? And so this is the result. We have an installation of a luminaria on the ceiling, and at the bottom 3 screens which documents the work Marinella developed online. It's a time where everyone had a video call or a video meeting, everything turned through screens, and the exercise, in a way, that Marinella was decided to develop was really how can we speak through bodies, but without a direct contact, through a mediated screen. and which was the first time, because as we know, Marinella's work is really bound into the encounter of people. And is this encounter still possible when bodies don't encounter? So that was an example how, in a way, this we could overcome that unforeseen situation, and how resilience became also part of the project which was presented. A second example is about today is also an example we wanted to bring to the discussion about reaction to a situation. The museum I work with in Rotterdam, Museum Boijmans van Beuningen, is closed because of renovation, and it will be closed for a while. So we had to suddenly invent a different program without outside of our walls. And so we thought that the city of Rotterdam could be our perimeter of action, and inviting artists to operate inside the city. Here we have an image of South African artist Neo Muyanga, which in his case he uses the voice, especially the singing, as a frame of communication. Also working with communities, and so in that case, it's a project which is currently going on and will be presented next year in March 2023, and also is a way to see how an institution can extend itself through its walls, similar to what Arturo mentioned about we are not in a closed space, we are a piazza. In that case, not having the building, we try to extend. So what happens in a way? You're not asking people to come to you or to look for art and to look for an interaction, but you try to shift that dynamic and go to the city, and maybe offering some experience to people who maybe are not looking for it. So it's more people will find the experience of art instead of looking for it, and that's I find it interesting in a way how then you can reach what Marinella once described as gli ultimi, the last ones.
Thank you, Francesco. I found it fascinating that once it's the pandemic, once it could be renovation, but now we need to get used to the fact that our walls do not support always the physical ones, do not always support what we want to do, but the artist and her own way to do things and to elaborate on concepts could instead support the relationship with the communities much more strongly. So when discussing about fragility, we also said among the four of us, it's better if Marinella speaks as the last among the three of them, because she will have the most meaningful things to say. So the artist comments at the end of each question, so that we can listen directly from her about her practice and how this practice is helpful for building up communities.
Hi everybody, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk about my practice, because I guess it's part of my work to talk about it. All my research as an artist is focused on participation, not only as a modality to work, but also as content. And I think we are just at the beginning of this very big new, super interesting wave of people that are more interested in other people. When we talk about a marginalized group, stigmatized group, and fragility, I'm always a bit skeptical that really artists working in the social field are really social. very often what we call a participatory project is just a bounce of indication that the artist provides for people, normally people not engaged in the system, in this industry, because at the end it is an industry, and it's just a fulfillment of the artist's wishes. This, in my opinion, doesn't have nothing to do with the participation, with the engagement, with the community-based project. It's true that during the pandemic, in a moment of physical distancing, we reflected more on social closeness. But I'm afraid that a lot of these topics are still frozen and need to be explored more. I'm not interested only in engaging people fragile, also because this concept of fragility or vulnerability can be completely rewritten within the creative and safe space of the artwork, the art experience and the process. But in general, I'm interested to know why a lot of people don't use art, why a lot of people don't recognize themselves in art institution, why they don't go there. And I'm not talking about the tourists, but the local people. Actually, it's very common that very big museum and institution around the world commission me projects in order to engage the local community. So I'm fascinated and very intriguing by the fact that a lot of art nowadays, it's not connected to life at all and to people at all. I'm not saying that more introspective processes are not interesting, because definitely they are, but it's not what I'm really focused on. I don't look at art if not connected with people here and now. And I'm not interested in any institution which is not open to be also a production center, a place where people can find a space. When I talk about people, I talk about population that is not made just by art lovers or us, curators, artists, critics, so the people that work in this system. I think that art is something so ancestral and so primary for our lives that helps us to navigate this world. And I like to think that art is useful and can be useful. Yeah, and that's exactly what I try to foster every time. If I succeed or not, this is up to people, but for sure, I'm not an abusive artist. I don't fulfill my desire, but I really create, taking all the risk of this action, really creating with the people here and now. Actually, this big lighting structure that you see, that comes, we call in Italian luminarie, which means something similar to light in the air, not exactly, but similar from Latin. And they are very traditional in the south of my country. And I'm from the south of my country. They're very traditional because now they're mostly used for religious rituals to celebrate Catholic saints. But actually, in their original meaning, at the beginning of the last century, when people in the south started, and I guess in the global south there are a lot of experience with light very similar, this idea of religious ritual was transcendent. They became ephemeral architecture, temporary architecture, for people to socialize. They were temporarily installed to create spaces for gathering. And that's the very meaning I'm interested in. I'm not obsessed by tradition unless tradition or history can activate something in the present. So I like to imagine that this, and propose, offer, because that's what artists can do, just offering and not imposing, just offering. I like to offer this as a new idea about monuments. I personally dislike very much the monuments that are just devoted to white male figures that most of the time killed a lot of people in battles, or this history consecrated for reasons that I don't really accept. There are not indigenous people, not very much, and not very much monument dedicated to female figures. I don't want to mention queer figures because, of course, this is even less or maybe nothing. So I would like to imagine that a female architect like this can be monument for the citizen and the citizenships here and now. And that's what people received when we create in the middle of the darkest winter of the pandemic. What we did at Palazzo Strozzi was exactly that. I told to everybody in every interviews, on the social media, in every occasion, and we had a lot of occasion, I must say, I repeated that this monument is for citizens. This monument is for us, here and now, in the present moment. And that's what people assumed. They celebrated themselves in a certain way. And I believe a lot in the celebration of us as a member of a community and in new ideas about how community can be. Maybe I should be shorter, sorry. Just want to mention that Francesco spoke about the School of Narrative Dance. The School of Narrative Dance is my main project. I created this in 2012, so this is the 10th anniversary. And I did because after a lot of participatory projects that didn't have like a common umbrella, no? And I realized that the lack of belonging was very strong also in my participants. I worked with over 7 million of people around the world in 23 countries, and now maybe for 24. So this is very impactful on my own life, but also on an idea of how many people want so bad to be part of an artistic process. And so I created a sort of container that is called the School of Narrative Dance because I wanted to do two things, basically. Reflecting and creating a new system of education. I'm a professor in university as well. I don't trust at all in hierarchical system of education, not anymore, not in 22. And I wanted to explore more horizontal system of education. And then I addressed also the dance, not as choreography, not as athletic gesture, but as an ancestral idea of dance for a community, like the community dance that usually are in a circle, no, all together in a small village and in ancient times.
Thank you very much, Marinella. Many topics all together. We could see that considering the communities, to me, means to discuss the physical boundaries of our institutions, and they may be private or public. If they produce art, they need somehow maybe to engage with this discussion of where the public space for citizens and communities begins and ends, and whether it ends or not. Another thing that I think the four of us could share is how much truly participative is our practice, generally speaking, when we engage the community in an arts project. It's not only the artist, but the museum as well could be more or less dominating. And then, as you might see, this questioning of our own bodies that becomes both technological and physical. I don't know if we have some minutes, if Francesco or Arturo would like to comment on these final remarks. Then we move to the local territories and international communities.
First, I think School of Narrative Dance, isn't such an amazing title, I think, and if there are few things we all danced. I don't think there is anyone in this room who never danced in his life. So you caught something that it's beyond what it really belongs to each and everyone, which I think is a perfect way to bring that more than this concept, these intentions that Marinella has all together, and to work within the frame of institutions, of course, becomes interesting, because the similar approach, if it would have happened, let's say, in the late 60s or 70s, it could have maybe seen as institutional critique, in a way. And I think that's also an interesting aspect about the now. What is an institution is now.
Yeah.
Yeah, then just can add that was amazing what Marinella did in Florence and what she's doing around the world. Just related also to the body, because it was incredible. This digital seminar workshop that she had, they were always body related. So it was about movement, it was about dance, it was about choreography, and I think this was a very precious gift that Marinella made to all these people imprisoned at home, and not only at home, because there were also people literally in prison, in jail. And this rediscovery of the body in this specific historical moment, I think it was more important than ever. Yeah.
Agree.
Moving from when we discussed together how could address this important topic, we thought about how our communities engage with art around the world, and we thought about the fact that we all have students somehow, or an audience we talk to. And for instance, yesterday night I couldn't sleep, and I enrolled in a seminar that I will attend in December at Chicago Museum of Contemporary Art on textile art from their own collection. So I will be at the same time at my house attending a seminar in another country. Now we can be here and at the same time being an international art not consumer, but art citizen, and we can participate of art wherever we are. But it is important, this dimension of the local territories. We try to preserve our communities because our ecosystem starts over there in a sustainable way. So the second point that we would like to address is how art is able to keep together two these very different things, the local and the international. And so first, this time, Francesco, and then Arturo, and only at the end, Marinella, to say,
so, yes, this
not
is
to reveal all
map,
the secrets in advance.
A map of Rotterdam. Every urban system has, I think there is a common thread with all, but then in a way, every urban system is different from another one. So some behaviors, I think, can be connected throughout, and I would like also to ask Marinella later what were some common threads she found in the 34th country, if there are any. But then everyone is specific, and I was just mentioning how our museum is closed for a number of years. So we, instead of closing, we expanded to break the walls of the museum and expanding into the city, and we were lucky because Rotterdam is a very unique city. It presents the richest and the poorest community of the country. It's a port city, of course, the biggest port in Europe and the big port in the world. With Shanghai, I think that's. It's many of the goods, let's say, that arrive in Europe from Orient come through Rotterdam, and at the same time, many of the migrants that left Europe to United States went through Rotterdam. So there is an in and out over a century, which is also interesting. And this division here with colors, we have. I wanted to a bit exemplify. So in the red part is the tourist area. Then the green part is where the students are. And The top part with dark blue is the let's say the wealthy part, and then the yellow is the rest, no, in a way. And inviting an artist to operate in such a context, because also the city, which was probably was razed to the ground with bombing during the war in 1942, then was rebuilt in the 60s. And the urban system of the city really helps that striking division. And you can really tell by being in Rotterdam that division. Also, in a way, I like Rotterdam because it's the only city I know that doesn't want to be beautiful. It's very functional, and there is not aim for beauty. So in that way, they set up in a different challenge. Everyone wants to be the most beautiful city. Rotterdam, they don't care. They care about function. So in a way, they win their own battle already, and that function you can see clearly. So this will be, it is our, for these years, our map of operational map, and of course as in many readings you have of maps, there is a strong division given by the river, by the dam. And the south part is the most, let's say, problematic, difficult, and therefore interesting area to operate, where art is seen as a luxury and not as a tool for understanding or to meet. So, in a way, I thought that this reading of the map could be interesting in terms of how we are planning to operate in this moment of closure. A second and last example was, I'm sorry, I'll go back to the pandemic. I know, but not because of to express sorrow or a dramatic situation, but also to express how ideas could come out. We are in July, what was 2019? Yes. So I think the darkest moment, or 2020. Sorry. I don't know the times. Yes, and everything was closed, and again emergency mode. What do we do with the museums and Haoi is a large concert hall, which also had to be closed. Is about 15,000 square meters. And we were in touch, we were in a similar situation. Usually, well, the concert hall shows performances. We tend to show pictures, more static, but the idea is always to engage into interaction to the public. And we joined forces to create an exhibition that you could see within a car. And so that hall made possible this exhibition, which in a way was really addressed to the general public. And the selection of works from the collection was around, let's say, the relationship between human beings and nature. And we got a technical sponsor, which is a Mini with the electric cars within that indoor concert hall, and the response of the public was striking. It was 4 weeks of exhibition. It was sold out, and it was a way also to try to find solutions in terms of display, in terms of narrative of an exhibition, to which we didn't have much frame of references. So that's another idea how the public, the urban, and this one I forgot to say happened in the south of the city. In a place where there is no museum, there is no art center, etc. So the car became the vehicle, really, from which to read and to confront with art.
Thank you, Francesco. And from the example of Rotterdam and this practice of mobilizing the museum and mobilizing the visitors somehow through the car, to another city to offer variety to this discussion about being specific while being global. If Arturo Galansino can bring his experience in
Yes, I will
Florence.
follow what Francesco just said about creating a net, a collaboration with the city and with the territory. Palazzo Strozzi is a very good example about that. We collaborate in the last 5 years with 108 institutions, museums, monuments, churches in Tuscany, just bringing our exhibitions out of the wall of Palazzo Strozzi, creating a net of collaboration. And this is very useful in a city like Florence, because of course, it's a very special city, the cradle of the Renaissance, one of the most touristical cities in the world. But this could be critical and difficult for many smaller institutions, because many also big and important institutions, such as the Bargello, for instance, one of probably the most important museum of sculpture in the world, is squeezed between the Uffizi and the Accademia. So this kind of collaboration could help other institutions in being more relevant and more visible. Recently, the exhibition of Donatello with the Bargello was just about that, and he put the Bargello on the spot as it deserved to be. This is just talking about institutional collaboration, which are very, very important in Tuscany. Talking about this image, we are talking about another topic, but not unrelated. And again, we go back to the pandemic, unfortunately, but this it was a very special moment, because we are already in 21. It's just after Marinella show. Museums were still closed. Supermarkets were open, everything was open, and in Italy we were the last in Europe to reopen the museum. Italy managed very, very well the crisis of the pandemic, so I'm not here to criticize that, but at this time, this looked unreal. And for a city like Florence, a touristic city, that was a big economical problem, an identity problem. And so we wanted to become the kind of manifesto for our city. We wanted to be the advocate of this cause, an important issues at the time, reopen the museum. So the museum should be closed. What we can do at the time, we can break the wall of the museum. Of course, not literally, because as you can imagine, Palazzo Strozzi is one of the most important buildings of Italian Renaissance. But we invited the French street artist JR to make it with this trompe-l'œil, with this installation on the facade of Palazzo Strozzi. We call it the wound, a kind of hole in the main facade of the palace that was a way to reopen, metaphorically, the museum. And it was a way to put in dialogue and in connection the local community. Again, Florence was not visited by tourists at the time, so it was, again, just Florentine people. And they were a challenge to find the perfect point of view, the perfect perspective to find this trompe-l'œil, so this illusion. Because, of course, if you were in front of the facade of Palazzo Strozzi, you can have the right perception of the work of JR. You had to find your point of view, which was exactly that, 3/4 more or less of the palace. So it was fun to see people walking in the square, desert square, of course, nobody was around, and looking for the right point of view. And as you know, the point of view, the perspective is a very Florentine topic. This is what was invented. And this image became a manifesto. It was a very strong scream coming from the world of culture about this closure of museum, theater, cinemas, libraries, everything was closed.
And maybe in the audience, not everybody is familiar with the fact that Tuscany, we could say, the first among the many Italian regions, it's a region made of cities, yes, and made of institutions that are not so favorable to talk to each other, because they are all princesses, basically, of Italy and queens of Italy. And so having an international artist doing it as, as a visitor of the museum and a researcher, I could find that there was a powerful meaning in challenging the deserted square through the gesture of an international artist, connecting what we were living at that time to the, as I said, international landscape through street art. So it was a very courageous move and perceived as such, I would say.
Yeah, and it was internationally know this image through the social media, because again, Florence was just for Florentine at the time, but it became really, really successful.
And a not pandemic example of...
Let's go out from the pandemic. This is before pandemic. This is another important installation for us, and it was important because we were able to speak about important issues. In this case, we are talking about an exhibition by the Chinese artist Ai Weiwei, and it was this exhibition was a big retrospective of the artist, but the installation on the facade inside the museum, but outside on the facade, Ai Weiwei wanted to use Palazzo Strozzi as a symbol of our European values coming from the Renaissance, to speak about migration, that at the time and still today, unfortunately, is one of the hottest topic, the most critical topic we are discussing every day. So he put on the facade this raft, these emergency boats used by the migrants and by the people rescuing migrants in the Mediterranean Sea. So this installation was about talking about emergencies and how art can be important to talk about that, and to use art as a vehicle to speak about important and relevant issues of our time. And this exhibition was very successful by normal public, but I'm proud to say that this installation was able to reach also a public that is not normally involved in the cultural system. Another sad moment in our recent history in Florence was an accident that happened during the exhibition. Few migrants, they died in a fire in one of the shelters that they had in the suburbia of the city, and they came in a very peaceful way to protest at Palazzo Strozzi, in the courtyard of this Renaissance building, because they saw in this installation something that was speaking about them. And this is something I think unprecedented in the recent history of exhibitions, I think, because as Marinella said 5 minutes ago, and I think she's totally right, often museum, exhibition, culture are excluding a lot of people, and we have to work for involving and including them in this process. And so this very peaceful protest was also useful for them, because the museum was seen as a tool to be put in contact with politicians and with the power. So all the work that they are excluded by. Yeah.
Thank you, Arturo. Marinella, could you help us to, put together Rotterdam and Firenze, maybe the other 32 places in the world where you have worked? Because now we have the solitude or, the protest, many important topics that regards a community, and maybe you can help us to put everything together.
Yeah, I guess starting from what Francesco suggested, what all these people in so many countries have in common, well, almost nothing, but the lack of perception of what is a community, what a community should be, how they could feel, what really is, and this lack of belonging that is healed just by traditional topics. They may survive the pass of the time, and you anchored to some community are really anchored to traditional dance, music, or whatever other small or big rituals in order to image what they could be as a group, what they could mean as a group. So beside that, I want just to say that in my experience, and now it's over 20 years of work, the first thing that I always address to director, museum, and curator, like my two friends, Arturo and Francesco, is let me be site-specific. There is no formula I can use here or in Los Angeles or in south of Italy or in UK that can work in all these places. And you can even exclude more people or stigmatize people by your actions. For instance, one of the first things we are planning to make in Rotterdam a special project with Francesco, and one of the first thing and the first information I wanted to know, and we discussed it together when he made me a visit in my studio in Rome with another colleague, was how many languages are spoken in Rotterdam, and apparently over more than 100 and something. And I said, okay, Francesco, we must make an open call in all these languages. And this is a huge work for the institution that is completely challenged by the artist, for the artist, for the studio of the artist, for the mental health of the artist as well. So, but this is the right way to proceed. Something local, when it's true, it's universal. Because people can, as the great Jacques Rancière says, just a man can emancipate a man. People can emancipate other people. And it's through a community and another community and another community and another community that we can create really something meaningful for people. Of course, I'm talking about my personal point of view and my practice that sometimes is very politic, sometimes it sounds like activism tout court, but at the end of the day, when you deal with the people and their life, that is not only the bubble where we are in, when we are into a system, whatever system we are in, not only art, but when we go on the street, where the School of Art and Dance is always on the street, of course you touch social topics and you touch a lot of sensitivities, and you deal with history, with the biographies, with the memory, collective memory as well, that sometimes needed to be healed instead of showed. Yeah, so I found my coherence and my language is so internationally acclaimed and loved because I really work with the people in the local, and because a project is true. When this project is true to itself and what aims an artist like me to work with the community, it cannot work. It cannot. It cannot be just local, because local means a lot of things. People are full of ancestral and common traits, full of a lot of sorrows that can be addressed in a different way. We can be spoken in a different way, but definitely are sorrows. The greatest artists of the world, the artists that inspired me the most, weren't the artists that created the platforms like mine or practices like mine, but artists that spoken to everybody because they touched really something in every person, no matter the culture. And I'm not talking about a very naive sense of common word, because it's not this. The boundaries and the frontiers are the biggest problem of our time, and migration is just a consequence of that. And but I'm talking about something that really happens when art, that is also a very archetypal language for people, and not spoken just by art lovers or expertise. Actually, art, as it was the case in Palazzo Strozzi, with Ai Weiwei installation, people recognize themselves. And this is the most important topic to address. When you recognize yourself, and that's my critique to institutions, and I will die until the end of my life insisting that institutions should be a place for people and not a place just for expertise or artist lover. And they recognize themselves in that facade, and they found that that was a safe place for them to express what they are. They're not artists, they were protesters, people in need. So that's exactly when what means to me when a project is real and it's true to itself. So I think that this should be the leading line for this kind of practice, which are the present, not the future, which are the present and should be the focus of every institution. The cultural institution mean a lot for a community. They can create, actually, community around them.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Grazie.
Thank
I
you.
trust in what I say, and sometimes I even experience that.
No, thank you. Thank you very much, Marinella, and also to Francesco and Arturo. We have been challenged on challenging topics like what is the community, what is the institution, how art can build this net that is open and true to everyone. Maybe in the audience there is some questions or things that caught your ear and you want to ask about. You want to add something? No.
And Marinella was so eloquent that I think it's the best way.
I'm very theatrical, I'm sorry.
Could you name one of the artists you mentioned?
Tim Rollins and KOS, Kids of Survival. Felix Gonzalez Torres, and a lot of directors.
He's also very introspective.
Introspective, but
yeah, exactly.
completely different from who I am and what I do. But I barely can stand without crying in front of one of his installations. A lot of feminist art, but also great director, the Neorealismo in Italy, that part of cinema history, in my opinion, is crucial for such topics as well.
Yeah, I would like to add something also about the source of inspiration of Marinella. Francesco, he said Torres, wow, he's so intimate artist. But actually Marinella, I think she speaks about great, important topic, difficult topic. She has a lot of passion. She also, she's a kind of activist sometimes, no? People say you are an activist.
Yeah, I was
but
for a long time.
Not like Ai Weiwei or also Chiara in this case. She's always very poetic. So she also, I think what is special about her work, I don't know, Francesco, you agree with that? She's able to keep this link between a very strong and political message and a poetical and intimate dimension. I think this is the magic that Marinella has. Yeah.
Thank you. And also from my perspective, I'm a sociologist of organizations, basically, but I study arts management. What really got my eye and ear today, beyond the meeting that we had among the four of us, was this attention to the language and to the body, and to the writing. So the narratives, the voices, the physical presence of people to address this issue of community that was very important to me today as a matter of discussion.
We have a question.
Hi, hello. I have a question, please. I wanted to ask about, I can see that most of your artistic efforts are all about community togetherness, and I was wondering, why? Where does this come from? Is there a story that you can share with us so we can understand? Let's say
the question is for me.
Yes, Marinella.
Okay.
I was wondering if there's a story you can share with us. What inspired the kind of art that you present to us?
Actually, I have a multidisciplinary background. It was very natural for me to explore the cinema. So I attended the National Film School in Rome, in Cinecittà, and I worked a long time in cinema, in movie field. But at the same time, I'm a professional violinist. So I come also from classical music, and I played for a long time as child, and then, well, more or less the same high, but also adult, I played a lot in orchestras. And one day I realized, more or less when I started working really as I wanted, I realized that both were two very choral structure of work and creation. How come? And now that I'm 45, I really connect all the dots. But it took me a while to understand that I was looking for experience that were sharing authoriality, the public as not a passive recipient, but also creating together with the enhancement of the individuality, but in a choral structure. And and of course I studied art. And it was so obvious for me that this was what I was capable to do and what I wanted to do, that I never really realized until very few years that, oh, maybe I made something that, especially in my country, was like being a bit trailblazer, because even in historical moment we had experience, like the first theater of Pistolet, for instance, but a lot of people were questioning, even if it would have been hard, the final restitution of this process, no? So it wasn't ready at all as country to accept it. And I never even questioned to make something different. I think that I'm an ingredient of my process, and now I can really spot that. So my real talent is the incredible energy that I have, and how this energy can mold and resonate in other people and empower them. But this is something that I needed to understand getting older. I was just doing all the time. And now I needed good art critic to talk about my work for a while. Now I'm more comforted by more contemporary philosophy, honestly. And I found I'm very comforted by that. I can clearly understand where I am, my purpose, my path. When we talk about body, we don't speak about being athletic, or we talk about mindful movement, somatic movement, mindfulness. So a lot of different approach that can heal you, can make you center, focus, and also understand better who you really are, or maybe where you could find love for yourself. So all these topics that are not very cool are the base of these practices, and we explore all of them.
Thank you very much to everybody.
Thank you.
Grazie.